Live from Washington, D.C. is Sama Al-Hamdani, who is an analyst at the Sana'a Center for Strategic Studies. Very many thanks for joining us on Al Jazeera. I want to start by asking you,
Thank you for having
whether
me.
you believe Martin Griffiths can succeed where others have failed.
Yeah, so it depends on what we are considering success at this point. You know, before we had 2 UN envoys who tried to mediate peace, all the peace negotiations kind of failed, especially if you look at it as a negotiation that involves every single actor who's involved in the conflict. We failed to bring them together and to kind of talk about potential ceasefires that hold in place, that don't fall apart within 2 weeks. But I think when it comes to Martin Griffiths, the bar for success is different. The bar for success now is to prevent a humanitarian crisis. It is to allow whomever is in charge of the airport of Sana'a, of Sana'a, the airport of Hodeidah, and the port of Hodeidah, to kind of allow the access of planes, humanitarian aid, and commercial goods. And so in that regard, what we're getting right now up to date is it seems that the Hodeidah airport fighting has finished, that the Arab coalition with its local allies have managed to secure the airport. Now, Martin Griffiths' role would be to make sure that that airport would be operational on some level, that it would serve the civilians in the sense that they have access to medicine and food. Of course, the port of Hodeidah would be next. And it all depends. The humanitarian crisis lies on the fact that this war right now is taking place in the only part of Yemen where 24 million people get their food and medicine and other goods from. That's the risky part. So the longer the fighting takes place, the worse the humanitarian crisis that is already in place, that is man-made, is going to be.
What is the incentive for the Houthis, do you think, to give up their control of this much prized place, Hodeidah?
Well, you know, militarily speaking, the Houthis are being choked up. They are surrounded from all fronts. They have so many battles. They've really exhausted them in the sense that first they had to go through airstrikes, and now they're coming in through the ground from the only place, like the Hodeidah port is their lifeline. It's the way that they manage to get things in or out. But it's also the lifeline for all other Yemenis, which is the tricky part. You know, you're choking the Houthis, but you're also choking the Yemeni population with it. And that's why you have the humanitarian international groups that are working for relieving this humanitarian crisis, saying that no, Hodeidah needs to continue to be open regardless of the fighting. And so for the Houthis, I think if they go on with this war, they can completely fight to death and probably lose because they don't have the resources that the UAE and Saudi Arabia have. They don't have that kind of backup from the international community. So it could be a fight to death that would be really detrimental to the civilians, or Martin Griffiths can here step up and negotiate a process where they can be offered a portion of government or a portion of participation in the next administration and kind of save them and also save the Yemeni lives at hand.
Well, let's look at it from the Saudi perspective quickly, because the Griffiths plan that seeks to put this, again, critical place, Hodeidah, under UN protection, a committee run by the UN. Why would the Saudis agree to do this? Because if they were to take the city, which they claim that they can, well, they'd almost have this war wrapped up.
So that's the problem. From the start, this war, every single actor in it wanted to win the war militarily. They want a clear victory, all sides. And I think especially since the death of former President Abdullah Saleh when he was killed by the Houthis, I think that was kind of insulting to the Arab coalition because they kind of wanted and supported Saleh in a sense or they assumed that he would win the fight against the Houthis, but then their calculations came out to be wrong. And so at this point, I think their reputation is on the line, their ego's on the line. So they want to come in and fight this and have a clear victory so that they can be like, we launched this war, it's been 3 years, and now we won. And I think I understand that from their, ego perspective. But when it comes to what they're doing on the ground, there are millions of lives at stake. And whether they win this war or not, there have been documentations of attacks that they've launched in Yemen that have targeted civilians and had nothing to do with the Houthi militia. There have been sites that were targeted that were historical. There were sites that were just pretty much homes, weddings, factories. And even though they're going to win this war, I think Yemenis are going to remember that, you know, this war was about them. It wasn't about the Yemeni people. And I think in that sense, the humanitarian agencies have to kind of remind Saudi Arabia and the UAE that, okay, you can go win the war, but we have to protect civilians and we have to protect the innocent Yemenis that are living in that area.
Okay, well, deep and fascinating analysis there from Sana Al-Hamdani, speaking to us from Washington, D.C. Thanks for your time. And this much